What is up, guys? Delboy here. A quick prediction for James Degale versus Chris Eubank Jr. This fight goes down on the 23rd of February and it takes place at the O2 Arena in London. How do I see this fight playing out? I've got to say, I believe this fight has come at a perfect time for Chris Eubank Jr. First and foremost, I feel James Degale is on the slide and significantly past his best. James Degale has had a long career. He's not had a hell of a lot of fights. He's only had 28 fights, but during that time he's picked up a lot of injuries throughout the years, and also he's been involved in some wars. I mean, the Badou Jack fight, for example, was a tough fight for James Degale. I think that fight took a lot out of him. Also, the first Caleb Truax fight, he took a beating that night. Porky Medina, again, a tough night for James Degale. And even earlier on in his career, I mean, go back to the Piotr Walczewski fight. That was the fight after the George Groves fight. And even in that fight, James Degale picked up a lot of punishment. So, you know, James Degale has been through the ringer. He has suffered a lot of injuries, and I really do believe he's on the decline. I mean, think about it like this. What would you say was James Degale's last world-class performance? I would say Andre Durrell and maybe the Lucien Butte fight. They are the last two fights where I felt James Degale is still operating at a world-class level. After those two fights, to me, he's been getting progressively worse, in my opinion. And yeah, I just believe this fight has come at a perfect time for Chris Eubank Jr. Now, we all know Chris Eubank Jr. is a flawed fighter. He struggles with fighters who can dictate range with a jab and move. He can't box with these guys, and he also struggles to close the range against these guys. That's his kryptonite. But James Degale doesn't do that, especially this version of James Degale. Even a prime James Degale would spend a lot of time in the pocket with his opponents or against the ropes. You know, James Degale has always done this in the pros. And as the years have gone on, as he's picked up more and more injuries, as he's suffered more wear and tear, he does it more and more and more. And I think it's got to the point now where, you know, this is a good matchup for Chris Eubank Jr. You know, James Degale, to me, he's never been an outboxer who's had a great jab. He's never been this guy who dances on the outside and keeps you at range with a nice jab. No, to me, James Degale has been a guy who he kind of relies on his athletic ability. He punches at weird angles. I mean, look at his punch technique. That's not textbook by any means. He's got a weird punch technique. He's got a weird rhythm. He can fight on the inside. And yeah, he catches you with shots from weird angles. That's his game, in my opinion. And if you look at a lot of his fights, James Degale traditionally has success early on. You know, he dropped Badou Jack early on. He knocked out Paraban and Brandon Gonzalez early on. He dropped Andre Durrell twice early on as well. And I think this is because his style is so unique and unorthodox, it catches his opponents off guard. And not only that, James Degale in the opening round is obviously very fresh, which of course helps. But if you notice in some of these fights, like the Badou Jack fight, the Durrell fight, etc., once opponents get used to Degale's style and they start to read his rhythm, that's when he starts to come unstuck. And partly I think that is because his opponents get used to the style. But not only that, I don't think James Degale has a tremendous gas tank. I really don't. And against somebody like Chris Eubank Jr., that's not a good thing. You know, when I look at both fighters, I just feel this favours Eubank Jr. James Degale in this fight would need to use a consistent jab, delivered straight and long, and he'll need to use movement. And that's something I've not seen from James Degale for quite some time. In fact, one of my subscribers rightly pointed out that, you know, in the amateurs, if you watch James Degale's amateur fights, he was much more reliant on the jab then. He was like a fencer type of fighter. He'd fence and move, and he'd pick up points. But as a pro, I would say James Degale has neglected that jab. He did use the jab a fair bit earlier on in his career, but, you know, as the years have gone on, the output of that jab has got less and less. And, you know, people have speculated why. A lot of people think it's due to the, I think, elbow injuries, maybe. but I'm not sure. But regardless, he doesn't jab enough, and that is Eubank Jr.'s weakness. And although I think James Degale can he move for 12 rounds? Can he stay off the ropes? Can he stay out the corners? Can he stay out the pocket? I just don't see he can do it for 12 rounds. I could see James having success early on. I could see James Degale have success with those flurries early on like he always does. I could see James Degale being ahead after the first 3 or 4 rounds, but after that point I think Eubank Jr. will start to get on top of him. In the pocket, I would imagine Eubank Jr. is going to work James Degale on the inside. When James Degale is against the ropes, I would imagine Eubank Jr. is going to tee off and be the more active fighter. And overall, I just feel this fight is going to be a war of attrition, and at this stage, it's going to favour Eubank Jr. In fact, I could see this fight being a bit messy on the inside. Eubank Jr., he does throw a lot on the inside, but at times he does smother his own work. He allows himself to get clinched, and I could see James Degale trying to clinch a lot in this fight. I think it will be borderline excessive, and at times I think you could see a messy fight, but ultimately I still believe Eubank Jr. will be the guy doing the work, and yeah, he will win the rounds based on activity. A lot of rounds, like I said, could be messy, could be hard to score, but I think people will favour Eubank's work rate. Ultimately, I feel this fight has come at a bad time for James Degale. And secondly, out of all of the high-profile super middleweights, I don't think James Degale is a terrible stylistic matchup for Eubank Jr. So I do make Eubank Jr. a favourite, and I do believe he will outwork James Degale, especially in the second half of the fight. Will he get a stoppage? Maybe. I do feel James Degale's punch resistance is declining, but maybe James Degale can hold on for a points decision. Ultimately, I am going to go with a Eubank Jr. late stoppage or points win. I just don't think this fight is good for James Degale right now, and ultimately there's a reason why James Degale did not want to fight Jose Uzcategui. You know, he was a bad matchup for James Degale, and I think James Degale knew that at this stage of his career, you know, chances are he would have lost that fight. So why not preserve yourself for a big domestic payday with the likes of Eubank Jr. That's how I see this fight. I think James Degale knows there's not much left in the tank. And yeah, I believe Eubank Jr. wins this fight. Share your thoughts below. How do you see this fight going? Peace.